Yo, real talk. Want to know the most gangster move you can pull on a system that's dead set on farming you for profit? Get boring. Not broken, not beat down, not checked out like some NPC. Boring. And I'm not talking about that soul-dead Netflix zombie boring. I'm talking about the kind of boring that makes you ungovernable, unpredictable to their data mining, invisible to their AI overlords, straight up useless to their money-printing machines. They can't sell Jack to someone who doesn't want a damn thing. Can't control someone who doesn't take the bait. Can't play puppet master with someone whose nervous system isn't lit up 24/7 like Times Square on New Year's Eve. Buckle up. This is gonna mess with your head. All right, so check it. There's this dude Thoreau. Yeah, Henry David Thoreau, back in 1845, and my man straight up said, "Screw this" to society. Grabbed an axe and some borrowed tools and bounced to the woods near Walden Pond with a plan that everybody around him thought was certifiably insane. They called it retreat, like he was running scared. He called it war. And by the time we're done here, you're gonna understand the difference, bro. Because the boring life, that ain't the participation trophy for people who couldn't hack it. Nah, that's the final boss move, the ultimate power play. But here's the kicker nobody wants to tell you, and it's crucial, fam. There's this mechanism, this specific psychological shift that makes the whole thing work. Without it, simplicity just becomes you depriving yourself. Boredom becomes straight up torture. Withdrawal becomes weakness, and you fold like a lawn chair. But with it, you become untouchable, bulletproof. We'll get there, trust me. But first, you gotta see just how deep this trap really goes. And I mean deep. Here's a question that should low-key disturb the hell out of you. Why are you so freaking tired? Not physically, we're gonna set that aside for a sec. I'm talking emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. If that word doesn't make you want to peace out, why do you wake up so many mornings already gassed, running on E before you even get out of bed? Why does the thought of another day sometimes feel like you're carrying a piano on your back instead of an opportunity to do dope stuff? You've probably blamed yourself, right? I need more discipline. My sleep schedule's trash. I don't have enough purpose. Maybe you Googled burnout symptoms and nodded along like, yup, that's me. But yo, what if, and stay with me here, what if the exhaustion isn't some bug in your programming? What if it's the actual product they're selling? The whole point? See, the economic model of the 21st century doesn't run on your labor anymore. Not primarily anyway. It runs on your attention, your emotional bandwidth, your reactions, your engagement. Every single notification that buzzes your phone. Every manufactured outrage cycle that gets you heated, every carefully engineered cliffhanger in whatever streaming series is currently rotting your brain, every infinite scroll that keeps you glued to the screen like a zombie, every fear-based news headline designed to spike your cortisol. These aren't side effects of a connected world, bro. They're features. You are not using these platforms. You are being metabolized by them. Digested, turned into data and dollars. And here's what makes this particularly evil. Straight up sinister. They've convinced you that stimulation equals living, that a calendar packed to the brim with obligations equals importance. That hustle equals purpose. So you chase and chase and chase, running on that hamster wheel, and you call it ambition. You call it grinding. You call it staying on your hustle. Meanwhile, the architects of this whole system, the dudes who actually built the attention economy, the tech billionaires pulling the strings, what do? They send their kids to tech-free schools. They retreat to analog hobbies like vinyl records and mechanical watches. They practice meditation in silent rooms like monks. They read books, actual paper books, slowly savoring every page. They sell you chaos and buy themselves calm. They sell you the addiction and keep the antidote for their own families. This isn't some conspiracy theory, fam. This is confession. These people have said it openly, on record. The same executives who design apps specifically to maximize your screen time, to hack your dopamine receptors, they strictly limit their own children's access to those same apps. Why? Why would they do that? Because they know something you're only beginning to suspect, something that's been nagging at the back of your mind. The stimulated mind is the captured mind. The hooked mind is the controlled mind. In 1845, Henry David Thoreau was 27 years old, Harvard-educated, son of a pencil manufacturer. Dude could have done anything respectable by society's standards, could have climbed the corporate ladder of his day, made bank, dealt a name for himself. Instead, he borrowed an axe, walked into the woods on some land owned by his boy, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and built himself a cabin, 10 feet by 15 feet, one room, one door, one window on each side. That's it. That's the whole setup. He planted beans, read Homer in the original Greek like a straight-up scholar, watched ants fight on a tree stump with the intensity of someone observing actual warfare, studying every move like he was David Attenborough. He spent hours just sitting, doing what looked like absolutely nothing. To his neighbors in Concord, Massachusetts, this was failure made visible. A young man with mad potential, wasting his life, refusing to marry, refusing to build wealth, refusing to participate in the game everyone else was playing. A dropout? A weirdo. A loser. But Thoreau wasn't running away from society, bro. He was conducting an experiment on it. A psychological autopsy of the whole thing. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, he wrote, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Read that again. Let it marinate. Not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Damn, this isn't about nature worship, like he just really liked trees and birds and wanted to go full hippie. This isn't about escaping responsibility or checking out like a coward. This is about a man who looked at the trajectory everyone expected him to follow, the predetermined script, the conveyor belt everyone was on, and asked a question that still burns like fire today. What if most of what we call living is actually just a sophisticated, socially acceptable form of dying slowly? What if busyness is just a way to avoid the terror of actually being, of actually confronting what it means to exist? Thoreau wasn't hiding at Walden, fam. He was hunting for the signal underneath all the noise. And to find it, he had to subtract ruthlessly, cut away the fat, eliminate the BS. He spent 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days in that cabin. And when he emerged, he didn't come back with some hippy-dippy message about peace and love and tranquility. Nah, he came back with a weapon, a book so quietly savage, so subversively powerful, that it's been fueling revolutions ever since. Gandhi read it and used it to help kick the British out of India. Martin Luther King Jr. studied it and applied its principles to the civil rights movement. It influenced movements across continents and centuries, toppling systems of oppression, all from a dude who planted beans and watched ants. Boring. Unforgivably, powerfully boring. Let's talk neuroscience real quick, because this is where it gets wild. When you receive a notification, doesn't matter what kind, could be a text, an email, a like, whatever, your prefrontal cortex lights up like a Christmas tree. Dopamine surges through your system. The reward pathway activates. This is the exact same circuitry involved in gambling, in substance abuse, in any compulsive behavior you can think of. The engineers know this. They've testified about it under oath. They've written books confessing to it, spilling the beans about how they deliberately designed these apps to be addictive. But here's the twist nobody discusses, the part they don't want you to understand. It's not the pleasure that hooks you. It's the unpredictability. It's the randomness. Slot machines don't addict people because they pay out. They addict people because sometimes they pay out. You never know when. Could be the next pull. Could be 10 pulls from now. That uncertainty, that intermittent reinforcement schedule, is the most powerful behavioral conditioning tool known to psychology. It's literally the same technique they use to train pigeons and rats in labs. Your phone is a slot machine. You check 96 times a day on average. 96 times, and every single check, whether it delivers something juicy or absolutely nothing, strengthens the loop, tightens the chains. Now apply this to your entire freaking life. Social media, intermittent validation. Sometimes your post blows up, sometimes it dies. Never know which. News cycles, intermittent fear and relief. Crisis, calm. Crisis, calm. Relationships mediated through apps, intermittent connection. They text back, they don't. Work emails arriving at all hours, intermittent urgency. Fire drill, calm. Fire drill, calm. Your nervous system is being played like a violin, bro. And the song it's learning? Dependency. Pure, unadulterated dependency. When everything is exciting, nothing is. When everything is urgent, nothing actually matters. When you're always stimulated, you lose the capacity to generate your own motivation from within. You become a reactor, not an actor. You're responding to external triggers constantly instead of initiating from your own core. And reactors? They're easy to predict, easy to manipulate, easy to harvest for profit. Here's a historical parallel that might reshape how you see all this. In ancient China, there was this philosopher named Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, and he wrote this text called the Tao Te Ching. 81 short passages. You can read the whole thing in like an hour, maybe 2 if you're really taking your time with it. One passage describes the usefulness of a bowl. What makes a bowl useful? Lao Tzu asks. Is it the clay? The material? Nope. It's the emptiness inside, the hollow space. That's where the function lives. That's what makes it a bowl instead of just a lump of clay. He applies this same principle to rooms. The walls are useful because of the empty space they create. To wheels, the hub is useful because of the hole in the middle. To life itself, usefulness, function, meaning they arise from what is not there. From the empty space, the silence, the pause. Thoreau understood this instinctively in his bones. His entire project at Walden was subtraction. Strip away everything inessential until only the essential remains. Then examine it under a microscope. Then live from it, not from all the noise and clutter. But here's what most people miss when they hear about minimalism or simplicity. This isn't minimalism as an aesthetic preference like those sterile Instagram accounts with the all-white everything and the perfectly arranged succulent plants. This isn't decluttering for the gram. This isn't Marie Kondo asking if your socks spark joy while you film yourself for TikTok. This is strategic emptiness. Weaponized simplicity. When your life is stuffed to the gills with obligations, with stimulation, with noise, when every minute is scheduled, every gap is filled, you have zero capacity for what actually matters. You're so busy responding that you never initiate. So busy consuming that you never create. So busy performing productivity, doing the theater of looking busy, that you never actually produce anything that will outlast you. Anything of real value. The full calendar is a trap, bro. The busy schedule is a prison you build for yourself, brick by brick, and the cruel joke is that society applauds you for it. She's so busy, she must be successful. He never stops working, he must be important. No. Busy is often just a socially acceptable way to hide from the terrifying question, what would I do if I had nothing to react to? If there were no external demands, no notifications, no obligations? Who am I? What would I choose? Most people don't know the answer to that question, and that not knowing frightens them so deeply that they'll fill every single moment of their lives to avoid confronting it. They'd rather be exhausted than examine themselves. Thoreau sat with that question for 2 years. No distractions, no escape hatches. What he found there changed the world forever. Here's a concept you've probably never been taught, something they don't cover in school. Boredom tolerance is a skill, and it might be the most important skill you can possibly develop in the modern world. In the 1970s, this psychologist named Walter Mischel conducted the famous marshmallow test. You might have heard of it. Children were given a choice. 1 marshmallow now, right this second, or 2 marshmallows if they could wait 15 minutes. Just sit there for 15 minutes without eating the marshmallow in front of them. The kids who waited, who tolerated the discomfort and boredom of delay, went on to have better life outcomes across nearly every metric you can measure. Better academic success, better physical health, more stable relationships, better financial security, better everything. For decades, this was interpreted as a study about self-control, about willpower, about discipline. But recent research suggests something way deeper, something more fundamental. The children who waited successfully weren't just white-knuckling it, gritting their teeth through the pain. They had developed strategies to reframe the boredom. They sang songs to themselves, told themselves stories, made the waiting itself interesting, turned it into a game. They didn't just resist the marshmallow through brute force. They transformed their relationship to time itself, to delay, to emptiness. This is exactly what Thoreau did at Walden. He didn't suffer through the monotony of rural isolation like he was doing time in prison. He rebuilt his entire capacity to perceive. He retrained his attention, recalibrated his nervous system, until a single morning spent watching ice melt on the pond became more vivid, more meaningful, more real than years of social busy work had ever been. To be awake is to be alive, he wrote. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. Damn, that line is an indictment, bro. A call out. He's not talking about sleep, about physically being conscious. He's talking about the chronic distraction that passes for consciousness in most people's lives. You think you're awake just because your eyes are open? Nah, you're just stimulated. And these are not the same thing. Not even close. I want you to think about your attention as a finite resource, because it is. It's not unlimited. You wake up every morning with a certain amount of cognitive capacity in the tank, a certain amount of emotional bandwidth, a certain number of quality decisions you can make before your judgment starts to degrade and you start making stupid choices. This is scientifically established, proven through countless studies. It's called decision fatigue, ego depletion. The tank is real, it has a bottom, and it empties throughout the day. Now, here's the million-dollar question. Who is spending your tank? Who's draining your battery? When you check the news first thing in the morning, you're spending. When you engage with manufactured outrage on social media, arguing with strangers about stuff that doesn't matter, you're spending. When you say yes to an obligation you don't actually want just because you feel guilty or pressured, you're spending. When you let someone else's emergency become your top priority, dropping everything to fight their fire, you're spending. By noon, by freaking noon, most people are bankrupt, running on fumes, making poor choices because the quality fuel is gone, burned up on other people's agendas. And what do they have to show for it? What do you have to show for it? Nothing they chose, nothing they built with intention, nothing they will remember in a year, let alone something that will outlast them. Just a series of reactions to other people's agendas. A highlight reel of responding to external demands. Thoreau's boring life was economically brilliant when you think about it. He spent almost nothing, not money, but attention. He protected his cognitive resources like a miser hoarding gold, guarding them jealously. No social obligations draining him. No news of distant wars he couldn't affect getting him riled up. No fashion trends to keep up with. No gossip to track. No manufactured urgencies pulling him in 17 directions. Just the essential facts of life. Food, shelter, thought, observation, stacked, examined, understood. And from that protected wealth, from that preserved attention and energy, he produced work that still pays dividends nearly 2 centuries later, still generating returns, still changing lives. Here's what the system absolutely cannot tolerate, the thing that breaks their whole business model. Someone who doesn't want more, someone who's genuinely content. Think about it for a second. Really think about it. The entire machinery of modern capitalism, the whole engine, depends on manufactured dissatisfaction. It requires it to function. You must feel that what you have is not enough, that who you are is not enough, that where you are is not enough. Otherwise, why would you buy? Why would you scroll? Why would you chase? Why would you consume? Why would you upgrade? The system needs you dissatisfied, anxious, always reaching for the next thing. Otherwise, the machine stops. Contentment, real contentment, not the fake kind, is an act of economic sabotage. But I'm not talking about passive contentment, the kind where you just give up and resign yourself to whatever. Nah, I'm talking about strategic contentment, the kind where you look at the frantic masses sprinting toward mirages in the desert, chasing illusions, and you simply don't. You plant your beans instead. You read your books. You think your thoughts. You live your life on your terms. And the system cannot touch you anymore because you've exited the game they need you to play. You've unplugged from the matrix. This is what made Thoreau genuinely dangerous to the powers that be. Not his eloquence, though he was eloquent as hell. Not his Harvard education. His refusal, his absolute, unshakable refusal. He refused to be impressed by what society valued, refused to be hurried by their manufactured urgencies, refused to believe that his worth as a human being was determined by his productivity or his possessions or his status. In Civil Disobedience, his other famous essay, the one that influenced Gandhi and MLK, he wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." But notice the language he uses. He didn't say they were forced into it. They lead those lives. Active verb, present tense. They choose it daily by default, by not choosing something else. The desperation isn't imposed from outside by some evil overlord. It's an inside job, a choice made through inaction. There's this modern pathology Thoreau never saw firsthand but somehow diagnosed in advance like a prophet. It's called the paradox of choice. The idea that too many options actually paralyze us rather than liberate us. Decision paralysis, analysis paralysis, but I want to go darker than that. Dig deeper. Options aren't just paralyzing when you're trying to choose. They're expensive in ways you're not calculating, ways that don't show up on any balance sheet. Every option you keep open costs mental real estate. Every possibility you refuse to close, every door you insist on keeping ajar, just in case, burns background processing power in your brain. Every maybe later or I'll keep my options open is a tiny leak in your cognitive fuel tank. A slow drip that adds up over time. Rich people understand this instinctively. That's why so many of them, Jobs, Zuckerberg, Obama when he was president, wear the same outfit every day. They eliminate the small decisions to preserve mental resources for the big ones, the ones that actually matter. But they've only figured out half the equation, only gotten halfway there. The truly wise, the Thoreaus of any age, go way further. They don't just eliminate small decisions like what to wear or what to eat for breakfast. They eliminate entire categories of life that don't serve their core purpose. Whole domains, entire games. At Walden, Thoreau didn't just simplify his wardrobe to save time in the morning. He simplified his entire existence. He asked himself the most fundamental question possible. What are the essential facts of life? What do I actually need? And then he cut everything else. Not later, not gradually through some slow decluttering process. Immediately, ruthlessly, one room, beans and rice, a few books, silence, depth. That's it. He didn't keep options open for later. He didn't maintain backup plans. He burned them deliberately, torched them, because he understood something our culture refuses to admit. Optionality is often just a form of cowardice dressed up as wisdom. When you keep all doors open, you walk through none of them. You stand in the hallway forever, congratulating yourself on your flexibility, on how many choices you have, while actual life happens in the rooms. While other people are living, you're standing in the hallway, proud of your options. Here's a story that reveals the depth of Thoreau's commitment, the level of his principles. In 1846, 1 year into his Walden experiment, Thoreau was walking into town to pick up a repaired shoe from the cobbler. Pretty mundane errand, right? On the way there, he was stopped by the local tax collector, this guy named Sam Staples. Thoreau owed 6 years' worth of backpole taxes. The amount? About $1.50, like $1.50 total. Barely anything, especially for a Harvard-educated guy whose family had money. Pocket change. Staples asked him to pay it. Simple request. Just pay your taxes, dude. Thoreau refused. Not because he couldn't afford it. Obviously, he could afford $1.50. Not because he'd forgotten, but because those taxes funded a government that sanctioned slavery and was currently waging what Thoreau considered an unjust war against Mexico. He would not participate, not even indirectly, not even symbolically, not even with $1.50. Staples, who actually liked Thoreau personally, thought he was being ridiculous over such a small amount. He even offered to pay the tax himself just to avoid the paperwork and hassle. "I'll cover it, man. Don't worry about it." Thoreau refused that to, wouldn't let him. So they arrested him, threw him in the town jail. He spent one night there behind bars. The next morning, someone, probably his aunt, though he never confirmed it, paid the tax against his wishes, bailed him out without asking. He was released, retrieved his shoe, and walked back to the pond like nothing happened. But that single night in jail, that one night of imprisonment over $1.50, produced Civil Disobedience, an essay that would later inspire Gandhi's Salt March that helped liberate India, Martin Luther King's Montgomery bus boycott that jump-started the civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. All of that, all those world-changing movements, can be traced back to a dude who refused to bend over $1.50. This is not the behavior of someone hiding from life, bro. This is not passive withdrawal or cowardice. This is a man so crystal clear about his principles, so unwavering in his values, that he made himself ungovernable. Not through violence, not through wealth or political power or social influence, through refusal, through saying no. And true refusal, the kind that can't be bought or intimidated, is only possible when you've eliminated everything inessential from your life, when there's nothing they can threaten to take away that would make you bend, when your needs are so minimal, so small, that their leverage completely disappears. You can't control someone who doesn't want anything from you. You can't threaten someone who's already simplified to the point where they're fundamentally free. Thoreau recorded his expenses meticulously, obsessively, every single cent. He knew exactly what his cabin cost to build, what his food cost, what his simple life required in actual dollars and cents. And the number was almost comically low. He proved mathematically with receipts that a human being could meet all their actual needs, food, shelter, safety, with a tiny fraction of what most people spent. The rest, the difference between what he spent and what everyone else spent, that was anxiety dressed up as necessity, status dressed up as requirement, fear dressed up as ambition, keeping up with the Joneses disguised as just being responsible. The cost of a thing, he wrote, and this line is crucial, is the amount of what I will call life which is required to be exchanged for it, immediately or in the long run. Read that again. Let it sink all the way in. He's not measuring price in dollars or euros or whatever. He's measuring it in life, in hours, in years, in your one finite existence on this planet. That house you're working 60 hours a week to afford, grinding yourself into dust for? What's the real cost? Not the mortgage payment, the life cost. How many years of your one existence, your one shot at consciousness, are you exchanging for those extra square feet? For that second bathroom? For the right zip code? That promotion you're chasing? Sacrificing your health and relationships for? What's it actually buying you? More responsibility, less time, higher stakes, more stress, more pressure. Are you getting ahead? Or are you just getting more entangled? More trapped? Thoreau's question cuts through every justification, every rationalization. Is what you're gaining actually worth the life you're spending to get it? The years you're trading? Most people never ask this question because they're terrified of the answer. They already know deep down, but they can't face it. Here's a neurological reality that has profound implications for all of this. Your brain has two primary modes of operation, two gears, the focused mode and the default mode. Focused mode is what you think of as thinking, active attention, problem solving, learning, concentration, getting stuff done, grinding. Default mode is what happens when you're not focused on anything specific. Daydreaming, mind-wandering, staring out windows, spacing out. Modern productivity culture, hustle culture, Gary Vee culture, it worships focused mode exclusively. Every minute must be optimized for productivity. Every gap must be filled with content. Every moment is an opportunity to consume or produce. Podcast in the car on the commute, audiobook on the walk, Twitter while waiting in line. Never just be. But here's what the actual research shows, what the neuroscience tells us. Your most creative insights, your biggest breakthroughs, they come from default mode. When your mind wanders and you're not trying to force anything, your brain starts connecting disparate ideas you wouldn't consciously put together. Synthesizing, making leaps, seeing patterns. Every major creative breakthrough in history was preceded by long periods of apparent doing nothing. Newton sitting under the apple tree, spacing out. Archimedes chilling in the bath. Darwin on his long, aimless walks through the countryside. Einstein on his bicycle, just riding around with no destination. Boredom isn't the absence of productivity. It's the precondition for deep productivity, for real creativity, for original thought. When Thoreau sat for hours and hours just watching the pond, observing the ice, tracking the seasons, he wasn't wasting time like his neighbors thought. He was creating the mental space, the cognitive emptiness, where Walden could emerge, where civil disobedience could crystallize. His boring life produced more lasting value, more impact than 1,000 busy executives who couldn't sit still for 10 minutes if their lives depended on it. There's this psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. Whatever level of stimulation you become accustomed to becomes your new baseline, your new normal. The exciting becomes normal. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. This is why lottery winners return to their baseline happiness within a year on average. They adapt. Why the thrill of a new car fades within weeks or months. Why the dream house becomes just the house after you've lived there for a while. But here's the dark side nobody discusses, the part they leave out. The treadmill goes both ways, up and down. If you continuously escalate stimulation, more drama, more intensity, more excitement, more dopamine hits, you don't stay at some elevated happy level. You require more stimulation just to feel anything at all. You're not becoming more alive. You're becoming more numb, raising the threshold until only extreme experiences even register, until normal life feels like nothing. This is why thrill seekers need bigger and bigger thrills over time. Why social media users need more and more outrageous content to get the same hit. Why people who live in chaos become addicted to chaos even when they say they want peace. They've conditioned themselves to require catastrophe just to feel something. They're dopamine junkies, stimulation addicts. Thoreau ran the experiment in reverse. By radically, dramatically reducing stimulation, he lowered his hedonic baseline. He resensitized himself, rebooted his nervous system, until the sunrise became miraculous, until the sound of ice cracking on the pond became symphonic, until ordinary existence, just being alive, breathing, observing, became vivid and intense. He didn't escape life by going to the woods. He intensified it by subtracting the noise that was drowning out the signal. Here's what bothers me about how Thoreau is usually presented in schools and popular culture. They make him this gentle nature poet, this harmless eccentric, a dude who just really liked trees and wanted to hug them. They domesticate him, neuter him, turn him into a Hallmark greeting card. But Thoreau was a radical, not in the political sense we use today, but in the original Latin sense. Radix means root. He went to the root of things. He dug down to the foundation. And what he found there was deeply uncomfortable for the status quo. He found that most of what we call society is actually a conspiracy of distraction, a mass delusion. That most of what we call success is just a more sophisticated form of slavery, wage slavery, corporate slavery. That most of what we call life, the 9 to 5, the mortgage, the keeping up with the Joneses, is actually just a rehearsal that never becomes a performance. Practice for a game that never starts. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, he wrote, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. This isn't permission to just be weird for the sake of being weird. This is a diagnosis, a medical assessment. If you're out of step with everyone else, maybe, just maybe, you're not the one who's broken. Maybe you're the only one actually hearing the real music underneath all the noise everyone else is marching to. Maybe they're the ones who are offbeat. So, where does this leave you? What are you supposed to do with all this? I'm not going to insult your intelligence with some 3-step action plan or a 5 ways to simplify your life listicle. The Thoreau lesson can't be reduced to a bullet point list or a life hack. It's too fundamental for that. But I will ask you to sit with a question. Not just read it and move on. Actually sit with it. Wrestle with it. Let it disturb you. Not for a moment, but for days if necessary. Weeks even. Here it is. What would remain if you subtracted everything from your life that was there out of habit, fear, or imitation? Not what you think should remain. Not what would look good to others. Not what your parents or your culture or your social circle or your Instagram followers expect. What would actually remain if you stripped away every single thing you do just because you're supposed to? Every obligation accepted out of guilt, every purchase made to keep up appearances, every relationship maintained out of inertia. That core, whatever survives that ruthless subtraction, that's where your real life is hiding. That's where you are hiding. Most people never find it because the noise is too comfortable, the distraction too convenient, the busyness too praised and rewarded. They die in the hallway of auctions and possibilities, never having chosen a room and actually entered it, never having committed, never having lived deliberately. Thoreau entered. For 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days, he lived in his chosen room, fully present, fully committed. And what he found there is still sending ripples through time almost 200 years later, still waking people up. There's this military concept called strategic retreat. It's when an army intentionally withdraws from battle, not in defeat, not because they're losing, but in cunning, in intelligence. They pull back to stronger defensive ground. They consolidate their resources. They let the enemy overextend themselves, exhaust themselves, chasing phantoms and shadows, stretch their supply lines too thin. And then, from that protected position, from that position of strength, they strike with concentrated, overwhelming force. Thoreau's boring life was a strategic retreat. He withdrew from the battlefield that society had chosen, the game they wanted him to play. He refused to fight on their terms, for their prizes, according to their rules, by their scoreboard. He consolidated, simplified, strengthened his position. And from that protected position, from that tiny cabin in the woods, he launched an assault on the entire machinery of unconscious living, of sleepwalking through existence. We're still feeling the impact, the ripples or still spreading. A boring life isn't a failure of ambition, bro. It's ambition refined to its purest, most concentrated form. Not ambition for more stuff, more status, more followers, more dopamine. Ambition for depth, for meaning, for a life that's actually, genuinely yours. Not something you inherited, not something you defaulted into. Yours. Here's the uncomfortable truth I've been circling this whole time, the thing I've been building toward. You already know this. Some part of you, buried under all the noise and obligations, the part that clicked on this video, that's still here after all these words? That part already knows. You felt the exhaustion of the treadmill, the hamster wheel going nowhere, the emptiness of the full calendar, busy, busy, busy with nothing to show for it. The strange hunger that can't be satisfied by anything the world keeps offering you, any product they keep trying to sell you. That knowing, that inner voice, is your compass, your true north. But knowing and doing are different countries, separated by an ocean, and most people live and die in the gap between them. They know what they should do, but they never do it. They live in the knowing without the doing. Thoreau crossed that ocean, not because he was special or superhuman, not because he was braver or smarter or more enlightened than everyone else. He crossed because he was honest enough to admit what he saw, to call it what it was, and stubborn enough to act on it even when everyone called him crazy. The question is whether you will, whether you've got the guts. The simple life isn't simple because it's easy. It's simple because you've cut away everything that doesn't matter until only what matters remains. That cutting, that subtraction, it takes real courage, clarity, a willingness to be misunderstood, to be called boring by people who are running in circles going nowhere, to be called a failure by people who've never once asked themselves what success actually means beyond the default societal definition. It takes the strength to step to the music you hear, however measured or far away, however faint, however much it terrifies you. If this shifted something in you, if something clicked or resonated, understand this is only scratching the surface. There are conversations I cannot have publicly on YouTube. Ideas too sharp for the algorithm, too real for the mainstream. Frameworks and concepts the system would rather you never discovered because they'd make you ungovernable. Those live behind the join button in the members-only content. The architect level, where we go underneath what's polished and sanitized for public consumption. Where we go deep. Most won't click. Most prefer the comfortable lie to the uncomfortable truth. They want the red pill described, but they won't actually take it. If you're different, if that part of you that's been listening this whole time actually wants to act instead of just consume more content, then hit subscribe. And if you want access to what's hidden, what's too real for the masses, step through the join button. You'll know if this is for you. You already know.